Okay, so now that our head controls are in place, it's time to take a look at our eye controls. So let's jump over to the whiteboard and discuss how we're going to approach setting up our eye controls. Now, for now, let's just speculate that our eyes are indeed perfectly spherical. We know that not to be the case, and I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of this video. For now, let's speculate that we have two spherical eyes. So we could say inside our head, we have two spherical eyes. Now we want some way of controlling where these eyes are looking. So what we could do, we could set up some controls that sit out in front of our head, and we could make our eyes aim at those controls. If we then move those controls around, that's going to cause our eyes to rotate based on aiming at the control. However, having just two small controls out in front of the head would probably be a little bit inconvenient for an animator who wanted to move both eyes in unison. So what we can do, we can provide another control that sits in between these, and this acts as a master for the eyes, whereas these act more like fine-tune controls. And the way this would look in a network, we'd have our null, which would be our master. And then from that null, as children, we'd have two more nulls. One would be for our left, and one would be for our right. So you can see if we move our master null, that's going to cause both the left and right smaller fine-tune controls to move, because they are indeed parented into that master null. From there we can move either side on its own, and we'd have individual control of those eye controls. But we're not just going to leave the eye controls there. We're going to actually set up eye controls so that we have, again, attached controls and detached controls, because it could be very useful for an animator to have attached controls whereby if we rotate our head we have no effect on our eyes because our eye controls are parented into the head. It could also be really useful for the animator to have detached controls where if we rotate our head we keep looking in the same way, meaning our eyes would rotate round to keep track of that same point in space. So we'd have controls that work within our head space. If we move our head, the controls themselves move with the head and the eyes don't get affected. And we'd have controls that exist in world space where if we move our head that would cause the motion of the eyes to move. So we're going to have both attached and detached controls, and to deal with that, what if we were to say this was our attached set of controls? So they are our attached controls, and then on this side we have the exact same thing, but now we have our detached controls. So we have our detached controls, and we've got a null, and then the two child nulls. So wire those in. This is our left, this is our right, this is our master. And again, these are all nulls. We only need to worry about having the fine-tune controls in order for our eyes to be aimed at those controls. So we could take the left from the attached and the left from the detached, wire those into a blend, and take the output of that blend as our aim target for the left eye. If we took the output from our right attached, the output from our right detached into a blend, and took the output of that blend into a null, this could be our right aim target for our eye. So that's target, there we go. So we'd have the ability now to blend, and both of these blends would be hooked up in such a way that the blend follows along with the same weighting parameter on both of these. That means if we blend over to attached, both our left and our right eye would blend over to attached, and if we blend over to detached, both our left and right eye would blend over to detached. So we have our attached controls and our detached controls, and we can blend between them, but of course we need to blend left separately from right. Now let's just discuss again for a second the fact that our eye geometry isn't perfectly spherical. If our eye geometry was perfectly spherical, we take those nulls that are aiming at those aim targets and they could become direct parents of that eye geometry, because the eye geometry would simply need to rotate based on its pivot point. However, we know in our goblin, if we were to take a look, that the eye geometry is more egg-shaped than spherical. So what you'd really want to do in the eye geometry that's been provided with the goblin is, as I have named it, placeholder eye geometry, because really what you'd want to do is create the eye geometry as a spherical piece of geometry, deform it and rotate it based on this rig, based on this eye setup, and then from there, in the local space of the head, you then need to deform it down to become the shape that you'd want for the head. That would mean really all we are doing is rotating a spherical piece of geometry, and then after that rotation has taken place in the local space of the head, you'd want to go ahead and deform the geometry into its egg shape or whatever shape geometry you wanted for the eye. Now again, this isn't something we're going to be covering on this DVD. We're not looking at how we can hook up our geometry to the rig. That's not the focus of this DVD. This DVD is focused merely on the creation of the rig, but I did want to point that out so that you do know that yes, this rig, whilst it works directly with spherical geometry, can be used to set up eyes that are not perfectly spherical. So with that, that's an overview of our eye setup. Then in the next video we can go ahead and actually begin implementing these eye controls. Thanks a lot, everyone.